Okay, it'd be great if we could just start maybe with a brief introduction to the company, the sort of when, why formed, any key milestones today. Just give us a bit of background.
Yeah, so Oomnitza was founded really to address kind of the growing gap in the visibility that organizations had over their asset lifecycle, right? They're really trying to figure out how did they continue to map and accelerate with the digital transformation that's going on. And I think one of the things we as a company saw was that CIOs and CISOs were becoming much more accountable for more than just operational IT. It was really how do they take the value of IT and tie it back into the financial aspects, the regulatory aspects, and the overall reputational integrity of a company. And so, the co-founders really drove the company to deliver a platform that was very purpose-built to really extend across the full life cycle, looking at how organizations plan for IT, how they forecast for IT, and then how do they acquire technologies, stage them, provision them, put them into deployment, and then eventually, really, how do they achieve kind of, final depreciation back to the finance piece of the business. And I think, the key milestone for the company was really when we understood that the uniqueness we were using around an object-based data model against some of the CMDB models and CASM models really proved to be a competitive advantage in really kind of correlating our information in a way where we could aggregate data across that full life cycle, be able to normalize it, and then deduplicate it, enrich it, and then provide that back as a single source of truth for all the dependent lines of business that that are in the environment.
Okay, and I guess the data center industry and therefore the widest IT industry, the two are obviously closely related, facing number of pressures at the moment. Clearly, the digital world continues to expand at a fairly rapid pace, and I guess everyone knows that the number one sort of front and center issue, challenge, opportunity is the AI explosion. So, just your
Yeah.
thoughts as to the opportunity, the challenges around that, and then we'll look at a couple of others before we move on.
Yeah. Listen, it's a great question. AI it's not just transforming the digital workflow and workforce. It's radically intensifying the demands, both physical and logically, and quite frankly, in power of the data center. And I think the explosion of this AI workloads in the environment and the unprecedented pressure that it's putting on compute power, cooling, and frankly, the security infrastructure. It's incredible. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this in terms of infrastructure scale. And I think what we're seeing is that more and more, as organizations are leveraging AI, it's really putting an emphasis on kind of three core areas. One is the visibility of data that you have across your environment, not just in the content that drives your business, but also in the content that helps you manage the assets and the infrastructure that runs these data centers, the accuracy of that data, and then I think the last piece is the accessibility of that data across that entire life cycle, right? It's really expanded to understanding that full life cycle of how you manage and deliver the capability inside of a data center, not just the look at the operational aspects of that. And I think we entered the market because what we saw was that from an operational perspective, there's a lot of players out there that are handling this. What we had not seen was kind of the leap from how we're handling end user compute hardware asset management into data center asset management. So how do you look at the supply chain that's impacted to fulfilling these systems? How do you look at the procurement of these systems, the storage of these systems? And quite frankly, what's becoming more and more important is the aspect of how do we understand the predictability and fail rate? How do we understand the refresh rates? And then, how do we take those systems into a decommissioning and disposition factor, as we look at the life cycle of these devices, and then really tie all of that back into, from an operational perspective, how do we make these centers profitable, right? The IT aspects of what's going into them, the IT management aspects of what's going into them are just as important and quite frankly, in many cases, just as costly as understanding all the other risks associated with power, cooling, and just physical location. And so we're seeing right now actually a great buy-in from our customers that they're seeing the leap. They are really the coordination of how you manage assets, in your infrastructure is translating very well to how you manage that from a profitability and cost perspective inside of the data center.
Yeah, and I'm guessing a couple of other drivers. As I say, obviously AI is what everyone's getting excited about now, but sort of already fairly well established and understood is the hybrid IT for
Yeah.
many organizations. We've got a mixture of on-prem, colo, cloud, and then maybe as well I could throw in a third, which is the sort of regulatory aspect. There's obviously some already, but everyone seems to think there's going to be only going to be more over time. So just your thoughts, I suppose, as to those two added pressures alongside the AI world, which is very, very front and center as well.
Yeah, listen, so I think the thing that's amazing right now is look, AI is in its infancy still, in my opinion. I mean, we've got some great minds behind AI and what people are doing. In the asset management aspect, it's really about the automation. And that automation today is really compounded by just the scale and quantity and the multiplier of growth of data. And so if you don't have a good understanding of how you're going to blend, all the aspects of on-prem, co-location, cloud, business partners into this AI optimized, data center model, then you're really going to be challenged with how you look at the visibility and the governance and the accuracy of such massive amounts of data, especially data pieces where you maybe don't control them. And I think where Oomnitza is bridging this gap is we basically built our product around recognizing that there are silos in the environment. And again, I'll go back to, we have mastered the idea of becoming an aggregator of data, across the ecosystem. And so whether we're capturing information about servers, racks, workloads, SaaS, even down to, facilities type capabilities in an environment, what it really comes down to is how well can you normalize this data, deduplicate it, get rid of all of that repetition, and enrich it so it's got contextual meaning as you try to apply this data in a unified way across the systems that are driving the efficiency and the profitability out of the data center. I think we have some unique approaches to that. I think what we're seeing is that we're proven to be able to optimize performance. We're absolutely a leader in ensuring compliance because we've got that whole visibility across the entire life cycle. And when you look at some of these critical compliance ads over the last 6 months to 12 months, if you don't have full understanding of your inventory inside your enterprise, you're going to fail. Well, that translates to the data center. And I think the last piece is you have to be able to scale that, and we've proven that with a number of the customers we have in our environment that are global leaders in their space, and our ability to demonstrate scale in the mitigation of risk across that scale, it's a proven capability of Oomnitza.
Okay, and in terms of existing, if we call them DCIM solutions, for if that's the right title, struggling traditionally, I guess a lot of the DCIM solutions came from the facilities, from the data center side, whereas if I've understood you correctly, you're coming at it from a slightly different angle, more of the IT and the data. So is that why, if you like, a lot of existing, I mean, I can't remember, we had DCIM 1.0, which I don't think delivered on expectations. I can't remember if we're now in 2 or 3, but the way you're going, do you think that is why you are so successful, whereas, shall we say, some of the more traditional legacy DCIMs struggle to cope with this, rapidly changing world, whereas you say IT and data is perhaps where we need to concentrate rather than just simply on the data center infrastructure?
Yeah, it's a good question. Listen, it's something I think that many technology companies are going to battle with, right? This is what I would call the defining of the swim lanes, right? Look, there are players out there that from a facilities operational aspect, they do it well, right? For us to jump into that space would be a tremendous amount of redundancy. When you look at the players that understand how do you handle the ticketing aspects of the break fix model in the environment, there's organizations that handle that well, right? When we looked at this, we purposely did not want to get into the ticketing kind of break fix mentality, and we didn't want to get into kind of the operational physical management of the facility. Those areas are taken care of. And quite frankly, I think those companies do very well. Where we saw the gap was that as these organizations are growing tremendously, I mean, look, I live in Virginia. Our state is seeing a incredible growth in data centers. And when you look at these data centers, there's a couple of factors that go into this. One is, how do you plan for the capacity of the data center? That requires an understanding of, where's the equipment, where are the assets that are coming into that center. It has to think about scale and growth, and it has to think about continuity of operations. How do we know when we're going to fail in an area, and how do we make sure that we're ahead of that? And how do we make sure that we're replacing that device properly on the floor so that it's not impacting the delivery of that company to its customers? I believe, and I think we are finding this to be true, that is an area where it is a focus of the life cycle of the assets and the technology that support the operational running of the data center and that supports the actual physical aspects of the data center. We think there's a hole in that, and we think we're seeing a gap there. And when you look at some of the major players in providing technology to the data center, the storage companies, the network companies, the rack companies, they're not looking at asset management in the same way that organizations have in the enterprise. They're looking at data center management. And we believe that the space we're filling, where we are looking specifically at how we manage the assets in the life cycle they go through coming into those data centers and how they participate in all the efforts going on into AI and the generation of automating data, we think there's a sweet spot there. And we think our asset-centric model is really gonna create an opportunity for a lot of companies to get this under control.
Okay, so in terms of the sort of the abilities, if you like, the properties for the good DCIM solution, we're talking things like automation, real-time, unified hybrid IT asset management, compliance tracing, I guess again automated, and then obviously the more traditional sort of things like visibility, cost control, and capacity. So yeah, perhaps give us a flavor of all those different things that come together to make the solution, which I'm guessing is where, as you say, Oomnitza comes in.
Yeah, so I think what we're going to see organizations kind of shift to is, getting 100% out of kind of this room-centric model, right? Today, I think a lot of organizations, think about this room-centric way of managing DCIM, right? And I think that we are seeing that the customers that are moving with this and understanding kind of our approach are really thinking about this from a perspective of how do we get to some kind of, I hate to use the word, but next generation approach? How do we look at where the real-time automation is coming out of a unification of what assets look like across the life cycle? Like, the critical part of this, I can't emphasize this enough, the critical part of this is that companies today are going through significant processes of planning and forecasting what they need to bring into that system. And then what they're doing is they're going out to their reseller partners and they're purchasing this information, this equipment. This equipment then gets shipped over, these POs get shipped to the manufacturer. And what you have is kind of the first fail point. That first fail point is when organizations order equipment and manufacturers supply that equipment, it arrives on a receiving dock. And how do you go about actually validating that what you ordered is what you received, so that as you go put it onto the floor in these data centers, you don't have that cost problem of, hey, I installed the wrong thing or I received the wrong equipment. The second fail point really is in the ability to put that equipment on the floor and understand its warranty, and then look at the historical patterns that are going on inside the data center to build predictability around devices against warranty timeframes, but also against past performance inside the actual data center. And then I think the last area that organizations really are are going to take a look at when it comes down to this. When you look at the amount of money that's being put into a data center, you have to make sure that finance, out of the CFO's office, understands how they're depreciating and recognizing that depreciation of equipment. And then how do they have actual proof to demonstrate that final appreciation? This is a tremendous cost in a lot of IT organizations that frankly gets overlooked quite a bit. And I think we've got some great solutions about how to really look at each one of these areas. And, fundamentally, you ask, where do I think it's going to change? We as an organization feel that there are some key pillars right now that your technology has to roll up into. And those pillars are, you have to be able to prove out financial accountability, right? You have to demonstrate what your audit readiness is in the data center. And I think the last two are, you have to be aligned with regulatory compliance, and you've got to be able to provide the data that's necessary around your assets in the data center that support that security oversight in your organization. And I think the final one that's critical is, how do you make sure that you have a continuity of operations? And I think our solution is driving all of that as organizations look to shift.
Okay, and in terms of the solution, I mean, would you describe it as a platform? Does it have different modules that build up, or is it a sort of, I would say one size fits all, but it's an integrated single platform? Or what? Just please give us some idea of how it's been put together and how it operates.
Yeah, it's a great question. The platform application question is one that's a challenge for a lot of companies. I like to define, what the approach we're taking as, we're building extendable applications that drive, a real business value. So we try to align to where are the use cases that are driving the value in the business that align to the profitability and performance. But you can't deny the fact that those applications, in many cases, have to sit on top of a platform that allows you to extend that capability. And I think ultimately, we are a company that's building applications that drive use cases, but we're fortunate enough to have a solid foundation in our platform that many of our customers have the ability to go and create their own applications and tie that back into to the call outs inside of our platform. So I think it's a blended hybrid approach. And I think what we're seeing right now is that many of the decisions being made in the data center are being driven around use cases. And many of those use cases right now are really coming down to cost management, efficiency, and the ability to deliver the information that's required for the outcomes those companies want.
Okay, and in terms of the feedback you've had so far, anything you can share? I don't know whether it's specifics or just more generally, what are your customers telling you about what they like, and is there anything else they're sort of asking you for, I guess, as well?
Yeah, I think the first thing is our customers have been very happy with our ability to kind of transfer our ease of use and kind of our end user compute hardware capabilities and our software capabilities into the ability to configure and kind of leverage our applications and our data center technology. I think that the other area that's really proven out to be a strength is it's making a lot of sense to people, this understanding of what we mean, versus what a lot of the people in the market mean around a full lifecycle visibility, right? Really understanding how you tie this into how your organization's planning for cost, implementing that cost in the environment, and then understanding how they decommission and retire. I think what our customers are asking us for, and we've got a lot of efforts going after this, is how do you tie the asset piece back into some of the room-centric and operational aspects? Like, how do we start to look at these devices and the impact on power and cooling? How do we start to look at these devices and understand, what is the power contribution in cost analysis? And I think as we start to learn more about where the synergy is between the actual, assets in the environment and the operational capacity, and then quite frankly, what's the purpose of the data and where's it going, which ties into AI and use, I think you'll see our product evolve more and more and start to develop more and more automations. I'd say the final area we're really trying to drive is, look, just because you're moving systems into the data center doesn't mean that you get to avoid compliance and regulatory requirements. And we're releasing new capabilities like our doc agent that really automates that process. And what we hope is that someday the vision would be you click a button and you've got your NYDFS compliance report on all of your data center information that's in New York or it's in Virginia, and you're able to comply with that. So I think that's where you'll see us start to go.
Okay, and in terms of developing the solution, you mentioned obviously earlier that there are folks doing should we say, the traditional DCIM quite well. But so, I mean, do you already sort of partner with some of those, or your product integrates with them? And is that something you look at, or do you think over time, because if you like, you've done the difficult bit, if you like, moving
Yeah,
DCIM
yeah.
forwards, it's relatively easy for you to sort of backfill and do the standard stuff within your own platform. Just any thoughts you can share on that?
Yeah, first off, our organization, from an engineering perspective, just has an awesome level of expertise in building the integrations into other platforms. We've done, we've got a significant number. It's well over 1,500 different companies that we're integrating with on the enterprise side. So our knowledge in that area, in that space, translated well into the data center side. I would say that some of the areas where I think it's critical to be partnering in this area, we work really well with a lot of the resellers that are out there in that ecosystem. We work well with the manufacturers in that ecosystem. We've got abilities now to kind of consume catalogs inside of those manufacturers to build that out with our customers. But I think a lot of cases technology's been built the right way, and there's a lot of APIs that we can access, and there's interfaces there we can access. But we're doing a great job of continuing to build that out through direct integrations, and I think you'll only see that expand more and more. I think where the critical piece is the ability to have a data model that's agile enough to be able to do a lot of this stuff on the fly. And the problem is that when you look at a lot of the other data models that are being used in this type of a capacity, it's very daunting to go in and try to make configuration changes to that environment. Our complete architecture allows us to consume any type of a schema, any type of a data model, and work with that to enrich the data across other models. And I think ultimately our ability to aggregate that data and rapidly increase the hygiene of it and spit it back out so that it can be used in a business capacity. Ultimately, I think that's going to be one of our big differentiators in this space.
Okay, and maybe just finally, I'd ask how automated do you think? I mean, everyone talks about the sort of much fabled lights out data center where someone sort of goes along once a year just to check that it still exists, and it's this kind of etc. Is what you're doing, do you think, realistically heading towards that, or do you think it will be whatever you do and however automated, it's still, if you like, a tool that to work alongside some human activities as well? Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to where that's headed.
Yeah, you're hitting like the $1 billion question for people, right? It's what's going to continue to be the human factor in automation of data in the data center, but I would argue even in the corporate enterprise. I don't have a good answer for you. I think what we are seeing today is automation through AI is creating an accelerator for the human that's involved in the process. And what I think is we're seeing two things. One is the consumption of data and the interpretation of data is reaching speeds that we've never seen. And quite frankly, I don't think we will ever see through a human. That, though, is also creating this model where we're starting to see these different variations of AI and automation that require the kind of common sense that doesn't necessarily come through IT to look at something and go, that doesn't make sense, right? And so I think for the time being, I think our goal is not to replace people. It's to make them more efficient, accelerate the speed at which they can be efficient. And frankly, I think our number one goal, and I think any company that's focused on asset management, software management, or data center management, your number one goal is how do you make sure that you reduce to a minimum the downtime that any customer has in satisfying and supporting their customers and their profitability. And I think if ultimately if we can do that, I think the cost savings, regardless of how many humans you have, will be significant, and the profitability will maximize. And so I don't have a good answer as to what will be the human impact going forward. I do feel though that Oomnitza right now, regardless if you're trying to automate to reduce headcount or automate to make headcount more efficient, we're playing in that swim lane, and I think we're doing a pretty good job.
Okay, I mean, it's been fantastic to chat and
Yeah,
some
you as
brilliant
well.
insights into the company and the industry more generally. So really appreciate your time, Rob. Thank you.
Yeah, hey, thank you so much. I appreciate being on.